all the time. Photography. Maybe.
Cool! How was your day?
Good.
Great. Thanks for the Canadians in the morning. Thanks for Levy all day long. And thanks for Fred, myself, of course, for the afternoon. It was good fun. We enjoyed it. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And we prepare also something in the dry, so let's roll. I'll do the start. Fred will follow. As a native English speaker, it's probably a bit easier for all of you to understand what we are talking about. These are the 5 points where we're gonna talk about with our little types of telemarketers, what the guys who were in Pamporovo in Bulgaria already have met, and then we have some specific technical inputs. This comes more from the side of Frederick. We made a survey in Bulgaria in the Interski group, plus we made also a survey in Switzerland with all the ski instructors who are a member of the Swiss Snow Sports team, so we tried to get a bit of evident data out of instructors, what they like, what they don't like, what they dislike. So we only had 84, which is a good number, out of Bulgaria, and 170 almost out of the Swiss ski instructor scene, where we could ask about what they like, what type of telemarketer, of what type of telemarketing they like, and what they don't like. Just a few numbers out of this. Of course, it was not that easy to get some proper inputs, but these are the main points I took out. The technical challenge was one of the main interests for telemarketers, to bring people into telemarketing and to keep telemarketing. Actually, it covered pretty much everything. The numbers from Bulgaria and the Swiss numbers were pretty much the same. That was one interesting point as well. There you can see 79 to 82 in this, and then also on the bottom 27 to 80%. So it was always very close to each other. So go back once, Fred, thanks. What they said, which is not a really big reason to telemark, is that they don't want to be that different than we always thought they want to be. Cool. There's one interesting, or there are some interesting numbers. The very interesting one for us was the very bottom right, the 46% number, and this is also the reason why we have chosen our best performer down here today, and we wanted to have this as a main focus for our technical input. Don't likes 36, freestyle and park was the other number for me, where I thought, well, why is this? Yep, everyone likes a best performer, and you don't like always what you don't like the stuff what you don't practice. That was probably one of the things we could see in Pamporovo. It was always hard to get the people into the park, into the moguls, into the jumps, whatever. And yeah, we have chosen the piste performer because we knew that this is going to be an awesome place just to perform, to carve and go hard on the edge. And at the same point, I want to say empowerment is everything in learning movements. So do more freestyle. Just put yourself into the park and do freestyle. And the bottom one, yeah, old farms. They were. I think it has changed a little bit. Thank you. This is me.
Okay. Yeah, we all got younger, clearly, 4 years later. we stayed young, that's what's important. So we're going to look a little bit at the technical kind of underpinnings of what we did today, but also in general, what we do with our instructors. So this was like the basic thing also what we wanted to do today, is that the emotion aspect, so trying to get the people to enjoy, is really at the center. And this is also at the center of our courses. Most of our courses are second discipline courses, so there are people that skied generally, but there's also snowboarders, of course, and Nordic sometimes. And then it's really important that these 5 days they're going to telemark with us, that they're going to be fun, because that's what's going to lead them to continue telemarking. And the goal is there that they're really to enjoy it, that we challenge the participants and try to take them out of the comfort zone. That's what we try to do today, so that the day is fun. Something we talked about today is we try to choose the focus depending on the conditions. Now obviously, you know, what would have happened if there were like 20 centimeters of fresh snow? Well, we probably would have changed a little bit what we did. Okay, that's really important. In our second discipline course, we have 5 days. You saw we have 4 telemarkers, like the little pictures. So basically 4 themes. And so at the start of the week, there isn't a set day for a set theme. We'll just decide on the theme depending on what works best. So if you've got 4 bluebird days that are perfect, then it doesn't really matter. We try to start with the traditional telemarker with the long stick. But typically, if we say there's one really good day where it's a bit harder, then we'll maybe do the carving stuff or short turns. If this day is just snowed or it's snowing, then it makes sense to do the backcountry telemarker. And I think that's quite important. Also, the piece before, it doesn't need to be the carver. It certainly doesn't need to be the carver with the bug. It could be other things as well. That's just an example. And the last thing is also what we try to do today is this experiential learning. So it has to be an experience, especially second disciplines is something that you remember, is something that you experience yourself. And then there's obviously the reflecting on experience that's important for learning, but it's really important not to break that up too much, we think. So it has to be really a moment of living the actual thing and experiencing it. All right. Okay, so this is the question, the leading question basically is, what build-up do we use to help learners achieve like challenging forms? So this is like the same thing we're doing today, except just with the hands basically. And this is like a fun end goal. It looks like a fun end goal, possibly. And so what do we do to get there, or to at least help people to get towards there? And so this is what we're going to look at a little bit now. The first thing is we need to recognize a little bit that there's, obviously the body moves in all kinds of different ways, and these are the same for skiers or snowboarders, but there are some movements that are not obviously restricted when we're telemarking, and really obvious one is on the left there, the toes or at the ball of the foot, that we can move that we can flex that. That's something the skiers can't really do. And then on the right side, obviously these are things that we can do skier and telemarker, but again, I'm making it fairly simple. Kind of the ankle movement, pronation, supination is probably more, we can do more of it in the Telemark book. There's a little animation I made, you can just let it play. So these are like typical movements that we'll see much more of in telemarking that are very specific. It's a combination obviously, that are pretty important. On the left we have this movement with pronation, supination here, so working with the knee to the outside, but the ankle is also working. And then on the right, obviously the turning, the twisting of the back foot is an important movement, and there's actually different parts where it can originate the movement. So this one we see now at the hip, you can see the hole. That's something I think the Canadians were talking about this morning, the femur turning in the hip socket. So that's one of the main ones, but if we look at the bottom, it's also actually in the ankle as well that it is happening. It's a bit more complex. Beginners don't need to absolutely know that, but it's interesting for us educators to know that these are movements that will be important, I think. Okay. Alright, so this is something we talked about in Pamporovo, but also actually in Ushuaia already, and this is something that's been in our system for a long time, is the importance, basically what we're talking about here is of the Telemark position. And it's always a play with a center of mass. And I think you can read it yourself. You need to maintain your center of mass above our base of support. For those of you joining our workshop today, our base of support got quite a bit bigger in that we were having these to lean against on the snow. So suddenly our base of support wasn't just between our 2 feet, but there was between our 2 feet and this point, a triangle, a little bit like a snowplow, where you're also making kind of a triangle, increasing your base of support. But in general, you want to try and remain your center of mass between the base of support. And we all know this, by making a Telemark stance, you increase your base of support. What's really important to us, and we have defined for those that are interested, a functional Telemark positions. We have 5 points that go into that, which I talked about in Pamporovo. But first, let me look a little bit at the images. It's important that that is not a fixed thing. It's not a position that you just stay in and doesn't change at all. It's a very dynamic thing. So once you've reached a position and the length, the distance between both feet is kind of reached, that doesn't mean that the movement stops. And what we've looked at is there are a few things, like if we look at here, that will define how your Telemark position is functional. Now the first thing is, this is the angle, and it's maybe a bit of an exaggeration, of where you can move due to the shoe, to the boot. I cannot move my leg too far back here. So pull back like this. Again, something the Canadians talked about this morning, at least in my workshop, that this is not going to be very functional. What might even happen if you start pulling back like this, the famous straight leg, obviously a lot of things, a step that's too short, but typically because there's a lot of weight against here, there'll be like a torque, and maybe even you'll end up having your toes sliding to the front or your heel lifting up a little bit, and that's typically not very functional. What we do notice though is if I stay within this range, the movement of my center of mass is going to be this kind of oval, and in general, this is kind of a general thing, as the forces increase in the turn, the center of mass will move downwards and backwards in the Telemark position. And that is dependent on this here, but of course, it's also just dependent on how far I can go down afterwards with my hip. We've got a little animation that shows you kind of, this oval. It doesn't mean it can do more than that, but you can see the step stays about the same. And when you tend to go up, you tend to go more forward. You can obviously go up and back, but there's a limit. And when I go up even more, then the tendency is to go more forward. When I go down, there's a point where I can't here, I don't have Telemark boots on, but I can't go further down without this leg lifting, this heel lifting here. And so that's what generally happens. We can come back to questions afterwards, but that's basically it. After we've looked at the Telemark position, this is something out of our manual in Switzerland. So we classify forms according to what kind of function they have. And so we have turns, and we have classified them from a key form, which is a Telemark basic turn with us. And then we have 4 reference forms. So we work a lot with basic movement patterns. And we have a few set of key movements. So very simple, of course, the movements could become more complex afterwards. I'll give you an example. So the 4 key movements are rotational movements, so rotation, We have extension, flexion, so these count as 2. I'll explain why afterwards. And we have then the inclination, angulation. So these are the basic movement patterns. And so based on these movement patterns, we have these reference forms where we're going to exaggerate one of these movements at the initiation of the turn. So as it then becomes the most important movement to initiate the turn. So obviously the reason we do that is to get an experience working with one movement in particular more than the others. And this will help us progress. So we can go to the next slide. What we've developed since then are these little kind of timing helps or timing sheets, if you want. Right, wacht maar snel. Kom maar nog iets terug. Genau. And the idea is basically to look at timing, what happens at what moment in the turn. So you can see here, this is the basic turn. I haven't really talked about what that exactly means. Basic turn is really the first Telemark turn you're going to make with a smooth lead change. You're not going to exaggerate naturally like one movement or the other. You're not going to go for the lead change to the highest point, we think. You're certainly not going to go to the lowest point to change, to do the lead change. You're probably not going to do an enormous amount of leaning into the turn. You're going to do a mix of movements that feels just right to get a smooth lead change. So that's the basic turn. There isn't really an exact definition of it. It's just your first functional Telemark turn, if you want. What is important is the timing of the lead change and then the timing of the edge change. And now we're going to go into a little video, which I'll comment as it goes along, to show you how this timing works according to us. Okay. Oh. All right, so you can see there are basically two sides to it. You have a track view on the left, and on the right side you have a skier view. You can pause it right there. Okay, so here you have the skier view and the ski view, and you have a timeline here. So you can see these circles here, you'll find on the track view over there. So you know what is what. You can play it again. If you look up, we have named the turn phases. Not that interestingly, initiation phase, first steering phase, second steering phase. We'll stop it right there for a second. Oh. Go forward a little bit. All right. Okay, and stop it right there. Perfect. Okay, so there's lots of ways to classify turns and how you split them into different phases. I know there are places where there's maybe like 4 turn phase or 4 phases. In the end, it's just to help us understand what we want to do. Description of the movement. There isn't a right or wrong, but this is how we do it. We split it into 3 phases. Basically, for this reason, so at the initiation, the start of the initiation, or that blue circle, is the moment, is actually the end of the previous turn. So it's maybe a bit confusing for some of you, but it's basically the moment where you have the highest edge angle at the end of one turn. As soon as the edge angle doesn't get any bigger, and you start flattening the ski, that is our initiation phase. The end of our initiation, and that you can define pretty concretely. I mean, there's one point where the edge angle doesn't get bigger. It starts getting less. So that's the start of our initiation phase, and it finishes when the skis go flat and there's an edge change. So you can play it again. Then the first steering phase is actually the longest phase by distance. It goes to the fall line. Now, typically, depending on what turn you do and how slowly you're moving, this may change a little bit where the fall line doesn't change, but it changes maybe where the ski goes flat. But in general, what we can say is from the moment the skis go flat to the skis point down the fall line is the first steering phase, and then you can play again. Logically, the second steering phase is what's left, and this is where we typically say you need to resist the forces. So if you don't do anything and you're in the fall line, you're just going to go straight down. I think everybody knows this, and you need to increase the edge angle further to get enough direction, and it starts again. So you can see it, you can play it, it's fine. You can see it with a little black point. This is where we are, okay? Quickly pause it there, perfect. So we're going to look a little bit more in detail at the lead change in the basic turn, what that means in terms of timing. You can play it again. You can see it here in the basic turn. The heels are lifted up actually at the moment the skis are flat, and that's also the moment the skis are next to each other. Pause it quickly. So the lead change takes up ideally most of the turn. The lead change is really the moment, most of the time we're in motion and we're not just in a telemark position. Of course, this may vary a little bit according to the shape of the turn, but the idea is that we want to try and keep most of the turn in movement, and then most of the turn doing the lead change, and then a short part where we stay in the telemark position. You notice that we strive to get the skis next to each other when they're flat here, so that's the green circle, the end of the initiation phase, and we've reached our telemark position by the fall line. So logically, if we look at this way, afterwards, the last part is staying in the telemark position. What's important to notice as well is that the part where we're actually flattening the ski, so reducing the edge angle, is shorter than the part where we're increasing the edge angle. So the part where we're actually increasing the edge angle is longer generally in the turn. Now remember that this will depend on how fast you're going, but still, ideally, this is what happens. There's more time spent increasing the edge angle than reducing the edge angle. Okay, so we're going to go phase by phase now. The first phase, we're just at the highest point, just there, and we're going to move from the skis, from being in the telemark position to having the feet next to each other. And the feet get next to each other, they'll be both heels lifted up. This is something that when you start telemarking, you see it here, some beginners will struggle with, because it's there's a position that's not automatically very stable in itself. We saw it today, we played with this position a little bit, and so it needs to be smooth. When it feels smooth and we're moving smoothly between one telemark position and the other, it feels stable. And that's a difficult timing thing to get, is to get this moment going smoothly. At this point, sometimes there's a tendency to rush the lead change, but ideally we would like to continue doing the lead change until we've reached the fall line. And then as we've reached the fall line and we have the position, we don't have the maximum edge angle yet, but at that point, I went rather quickly, at that point we want to try and get the center of mass going down a little bit. So you'll see between these two telemarkers that he's moved down a little bit. So this is stabilizing the position. This is kind of a general idea of the telemark turn. So without accentuating any particular movement of it. Okay, so that was a basic turn. And then we have 4 reference turns. Now these reference turns are typically, if we're thinking today of what we did, for those of you that were in our lecture, for those of you that were in our lecture, in our workshop, we went to the extremes. That was what we were doing, but it's helpful to know some of these key movements and the time of these key movements to get there, I think. So we have the same principle. This is going to be a bit quicker, and the extension turn, unsurprisingly, at this initiation phase, we're going to stand up. And you'll notice that the heels are only very slightly lifted off the skis there. And then we're slowly going to move down into really a low position. And the goal in this turn is really to accentuate the extension. And you'll notice when we say extension turn, it always refers to the initiation phase, is what am I doing at this point to initiate the turn? That's why it's referred to as an extension turn in this case. The next one, in no particular order I have to say, is the flexion turn. And in this case, we're showing the range of flexion here. This is why it goes up. This is what we were trying to also maybe achieve today a little bit. This would help us to go quickly into the turn, is to having, I'm saying somebody talked about it, having our heels quite high there, but our center of mass quite low at the initiation, and then extending through the turn. All the way to the second steering phase. And then moving on to the next one. So we've got 4 of them. This was another one that was important today. Inclination turn. And this is much more of a pedaling movement, so there's going to be a lot of inclination into the turn. And basically we de-inclinate, we could say, at the start, and then incline and try to feel that moving of the center of mass sideways to do the turn. So there's no real focus on the angulation as such, there's a little bit of it, but the idea is to feel much more pedaling and changing over. So having the center of mass moving laterally into the turn. And finally, and this looks a little bit different, just here, the rotation turn. Now, in telemarking, we think there are more rotational movements. We often can do more rotational movement as in skiing. And there's a pre-rotation, there's not just any kind of rotation, but we feel like it's important to know some pre-rotation, so there's some turning of the hip and the upper body at the start of the turn in order to initiate. You'll notice as well that the little, this is seen from the top here, and that this rotation, or we would call it, you would probably call it orientation, happens as we are flattening the ski to orientate yourself towards the turn. So these are these 4 key movements that are accentuated at the start of the turn, and being able to manage these key movements and to exaggerate these key movements allows us afterwards to go on to more difficult movements, or difficult forms, where there'll be, where we can do things that are much more advanced. So with these 4 key movements, we can actually achieve much harder or much more complex forms. So we're just going back to our second conclusion, and then afterwards, time for questions and maybe drinks. I think that the cool thing about telemarketing, and this is why it's built up like this, we don't want in our courses to force people into very just one way of skiing. There's a large range of motion we can achieve. We can move more than skiing just simply because of the gear. And so we're really working by exploring these different movements and allowing learners to experience these different movements as they go forward. And yeah, so today was typically that. We want to try and reach, it's fun to play with this balance, so we want to try and reach kind of the confines of our base support, so really go and look for extremes, and that was the goal today. In the end, like these animated graphics, this is not something that we've used in our courses yet. The idea is in the coming years we'll have maybe new manuals for telemarketing. We don't know exactly what form they'll take, but probably some of it will be digital. And the idea will be probably working a little bit more with animations, because we're talking about movements here. And I think the videos and animations are probably the future. I'll leave this out here. but maybe helpful afterwards for instructors or future instructors to know what to do, because fixed images is not really what we're doing here, we're moving all the time. Okay, so that was it. And over to you if you have any questions.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for a great afternoon, by the way. Had a lot of fun. I just couldn't find the beach. My question to you is, on the app there is an opportunity to upload materials.
Yeah.
This presentation, is there any chance you could find a way to upload it for us?
Absolutely not.
I just thought I'd ask.
No. No, I mean, these animations are also work in progress, you know, just ideas also. So as I said, it's not really something that's being used in our courses yet, and I'm quite happy to share them and also share some feedback. So these are just like drawings, and it's visualizing the movements we're doing. The idea is also to work with different perspectives. Well, I mean, we're always looking at Telemark as, you know, it's a good thing. We look at them from the side because you can see the step, but some movements you just see better from different perspectives, so that's why we did that, yeah.
A few animations are already online.
Okay.
Few animations are already online. If you're following the link on our lecture, you can find especially this angulation stuff and the center of mass movement. This is already in one of the academies. And the link is when you go on this paper, which is on the app, and you put the button or push the button down on the bottom right, you will find like a whole academy what we wrote last autumn.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks.
And we got some bags to give away as well. We didn't prepare a quiz. Now, if you really like want to take one home, feel free. Contact us. We have 2 of these little ones with us, and then some rings. We're happy to give them away if you can really use them at the beach or on snow. Come and help yourself. I think that's it. That's it, that's all.
Any more questions?
Thank you. See you tomorrow morning. We'll see you at the bar for a beer.
일이 끌었죠. 일이 끌었죠. 안 가려?